dock workers at ports from Maine to Texas began walking picket lines early Tuesday in a strike over wages and automation that could reignite inflation and cause shortages of goods if it goes on more than a few weeks. The contract between the ports and about 45,000 members of the International Longshoremen's Association expired at midnight, and even though progress was reported in talks on Monday, the workers went on strike. The strike affecting 36 ports is the first by the union since 1977. Workers began picketing at the Port of Philadelphia shortly after midnight, walking in a circle at a rail crossing outside the port and chanting, "No work without a fair contract." The union had message boards on the side of a truck reading, "Automation hurts families. ILA stands for job protection." Local ILA President Boise Butler said workers want a fair contract that doesn't allow automation of their jobs. Shipping companies made billions during the pandemic by charging high prices, he said. Now, we want them to pay back. They're going to pay back, Butler said. He said the union will strike for as long as it needs to get a fair deal, and it has leverage over the companies. This is not something that you start and you stop, he said. We're not weak, he added, pointing to the union's importance to the nation's economy. At Port Houston, at least 50 workers started picketing around midnight local time, carrying signs saying, "No work without a fair contract." The U.S. Maritime Alliance, which represents the ports, said Monday evening that both sides had moved off of their previous wage offers, but no deal was reached. The union's opening offer in the talks was for a 77% pay raise over the 6-year life of the contract, with President Harold Daggett saying it's necessary to make up for inflation and years of small raises. ILA members make a base salary of about $81,000 per year, but some can pull in over $200,000 annually with large amounts of overtime. But Monday evening, the alliance said it had increased its offer to 50% raises over 6 years, and it pledged to keep limits on automation in place from the old contract. The union wants a complete ban on automation. It wasn't clear just how far apart both sides are. We are hopeful that this could allow us to fully resume collective bargaining around the other outstanding issues in an effort to reach an agreement, the alliance statement said. In a statement early Tuesday, the union said it rejected the alliance's latest proposal because it fell far short of what ILA rank-and-file members are demanding in wages and protections against automation. The two sides had not held formal negotiations since June. We are prepared to fight as long as necessary, to stay out on strike for whatever period of time it takes, to get the wages and protections against automation our ILA members deserve, Daggett said in the statement. They must now meet our demands for this strike to end. The alliance said its offer tripled employer contributions to retirement plans and strengthened healthcare options. Supply chain experts say consumers won't see an immediate impact from the strike because most retailers stocked up on goods, moving ahead shipments of holiday gift items. But if it goes more than a few weeks, a work stoppage would significantly snarl the nation's supply chain, potentially leading to higher prices and delays in goods reaching households and businesses. If drawn out, the strike will force businesses to pay shippers for delays and cause some goods to arrive late for peak holiday shopping season, potentially impacting delivery of anything from toys or artificial Christmas trees to cars, coffee, and fruit. The strike will likely have an almost immediate impact on supplies of perishable imports like bananas, for example. The ports affected by the strike handle 3.8 million metric tons of bananas each year, or 75% of the nation's supply, according to the American Farm Bureau Federation. It also could snarl exports from East Coast ports and create traffic jams at ports on the West Coast, where workers are represented by a different union. Railroads say they can ramp up to carry more freight from the West Coast, but analysts say they can't move enough to make up for the closed eastern ports. If the strikes go ahead, they will cause enormous delays across the supply chain, a ripple effect which will no doubt roll into 2025 and cause chaos across the industry, noted Jay Dokia, founder of supply chain management and logistics firm Pro3PL. J.P. Morgan estimated that a strike that shuts down East and Gulf Coast ports could cost the economy $3.8 billion to $4.5 billion per day, with some of that recovered over time after normal operations resume. The strike comes just weeks before the presidential election and could become a factor if there are shortages. Retailers, auto parts suppliers, and produce importers had hoped for a settlement or that President Joe Biden would intervene and end the strike using the Taft-Hartley Act, which allows him to seek an 80-day cooling-off period. But during an exchange with reporters on Sunday, Biden, who has worked to court union votes for Democrats, said no when asked if he planned to intervene in the potential work stoppage. A White House official said Monday that at Biden's direction, the administration has been in regular communication with the ILA and the alliance to keep the negotiations moving forward. The president directed Chief of Staff Jeff Zients and National Economic Council Director Lael Brainard to convene the alliance's board members Monday afternoon and urge them to resolve the dispute fairly and quickly, in a way that accounts for the success of shipping companies in recent years and contributions of union workers. Krischer reported from Detroit. Associated Press journalists Ben Finley in Norfolk, Virginia, May Anderson and Wyatt Grantham Phillips in New York, Deanne Durbin in Detroit, Josh Boak in Washington, and Annie Mulligan in Houston contributed to this report. With a dock workers' strike threatening to close ports on the East and Gulf coasts beginning this week, Chris Butler is growing worried. Butler is CEO of the National Tree Company, and, like many businesses, his is counting on shipments that are en route from Asia but won't reach their ports before an expected strike by longshoremen starting at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time Tuesday. The company, based in New Jersey, is an importer of artificial Christmas trees and other holiday decorations. If a strike were to last just a few days, there might be time afterward to unload the trees, transport them to warehouses, and have them ready for customers this season. Yet if a strike were to keep ports closed until, say, November, about 150,000 trees might not arrive in time for the peak shopping season, imposing costs on National Tree and other businesses. In a worst-case scenario, those costs, multiplied across industries, could fuel inflation and pressure the U.S. economy. Definitely not an ideal situation, Butler said. National Tree already has stockpiled or delivered most of the roughly 2 million artificial trees it sells each year. But it would lose revenue if 150,000 of the trees got stuck in the pipeline. Other businesses face the same predicament, with goods that could be stranded at sea if 45,000 members of the International Longshoremen's Association make good on their threat to strike. They could shut down 36 ports from Maine to Texas that handle about half the goods shipped into and out of the United States. West Coast dock workers belong to a different union and aren't involved in the strike. A prolonged strike would force companies to pay shippers for the delays, and goods could arrive too late for the high point of holiday shopping season. On Friday, top Biden administration officials met with port operators and told them they should negotiate with the union ahead of Tuesday, according to a White House official who insisted on anonymity to discuss an ongoing meeting. Butler says he's hoping for an agreement or for government intervention to halt a strike. But the U.S. Maritime Alliance, which represents shippers and ports, and the Longshoremen's Union haven't met since June, and no talks are scheduled before their contract expires late Monday. ILA unity remains strong and is growing, James McNamara, spokesman for the International Longshoremen's Association, said in a statement Sunday. He said the union would update the public on any new developments by 11 a.m. Monday. The union is demanding significantly higher wages and a total ban on the automation of cranes, gates, and moving containers in the loading and unloading of freight. The Toy Association, the nation's leading toy trade group, was among about 200 organizations that asked President Joe Biden, in a letter this month, to work with both sides to reach an agreement. The National Grain and Feed Association also urged Biden to take action to avert a strike, which would come just as harvest season gets underway. Their push has put Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, in a sensitive position. Both have courted union support and don't want to be seen as pressuring the longshoremen to reach a settlement. Yet if an extended strike were to cause shortages of consumer goods or fuel high inflation, it could cost Harris votes in the November election. Under the Taft-Hartley Act, Biden could seek a court order to suspend the strike for an 80-day cooling-off period. Robin Patterson, a White House spokesperson, said in a statement that the administration has never invoked the act and isn't considering it now. Biden and Congress did step in 2 years ago to block a looming freight rail strike and force those workers to accept a deal because of widespread fears that a rail strike would have damaged the economy. Alex Hurtle Fernandez, an associate professor of international and public affairs at Columbia University, who served as a Labor Department official under Biden, suggested that the administration will follow the playbook it used in talks last year between West Coast ports and the union there, mediating negotiations without directly intervening. Greg Ahern, CEO of the Toy Association, said a strike would happen at a critical moment for toy sellers and makers. Up to 60% of annual sales occur from October through December. Though some toy companies shipped goods earlier, Ahern said a strike would make it hard to replenish hot-selling items. A strike, he warned, could raise toy prices based on scarcity and increased costs. At National Tree, Butler and his crew began preparing for a strike in July. They accelerated shipments for everything they could. But one major retail client, he said, asked for trees early. And until recently, factories in China and elsewhere couldn't produce the rest of National Tree's orders. Ships containing the trees are on the way to New York, but won't get there before Tuesday. A prolonged strike, Butler said, would force most of the trees to be warehoused until next Christmas season. A longshoremen's strike would further distress a global supply chain that has already endured slowdowns from attacks by Yemen's Houthi rebels on commercial shipping. Those attacks have all but shut down the use of the Red Sea and Suez Canal, said Jonathan Gold, Vice President of Supply Chain and Customs Policy at the National Retail Federation. The attacks are forcing longer transit times for vessels that must navigate around the Cape of Good Hope to reach East Coast and Gulf Coast ports. A dockworkers' strike, Gold said, could prove even more damaging than the pandemic-induced port congestion in 2021 and 2022, when cargo was allowed to move, albeit slowly. Eastern ports could be left at a standstill. Gold noted that carriers are already announcing surcharges on containers to address potential disruptions, a trend that could elevate inflation. Many retailers might find it difficult to charge customers more to make up for those expenses. Most vulnerable, Gold said, would be small businesses that don't import directly and lack the financial resources to incur higher costs. Shippers could reroute some cargo to West Coast ports, but those ports couldn't come close to absorbing the additional cargo. The Port of Los Angeles, for example, moved 960,000 containers in August, about 80% of its capacity, said Gene Soroka, its executive director. The major Western railroads, Union Pacific and BNSF, have added capacity to their systems to handle more freight as imports have increased. Eastern railroads, CSX and Norfolk Southern, say they can move cars and crews to handle more freight coming to Chicago from the west. But it's not clear just how much more the railroads can manage. In any case, Butler said, it would be too costly for him to ship trees across the country by rail. Taylor Green, co-founder of landscaping company Artificial Grass Solutions in Los Angeles, which imports artificial turf, said he bought 25% more turf than usual to ensure there would be enough for clients' projects. He also made arrangements with alternative suppliers in case the strike goes on indefinitely. If it does, Green said, price increases would likely be necessary. Still, like some larger retailers and manufacturers, artificial grass says it's better prepared for shortages than it was during the pandemic. We've learned to be proactive rather than reactive, Green said.